we are ready to go. So what we're going to do today is we're going to start up on specific areas of cognitive psychology. So we're going to start on one of the most researched areas of cognitive psychology, which is attention. And over the next few weeks, we're going to delve into different areas like perception, memory, thinking. Now that we have an overview of what cognitive psychology is all about and how we're going to think about the mind and how the mind operates, now we're able to delve into specific areas to specifically see what are the representations and strategies that are used to understand things like our ability to attend to different stimuli. So that's what's on schedule for today. So we're going to start off with just what is attention. So much like we had to define what is a mind, what is thinking, when we looked at the physical symbol system hypothesis, for most of things in cognitive psychology, we need to have a definition of what that process or phenomenon actually is. So everybody knows what attention is. Everybody's been told to pay attention before, and you knew exactly what was being asked of you. But when you try to define it, you really have to make sure that you have it down in concrete terms. So we're going to take a look at attention, the idea of serial versus parallel processing. We're going to take a look at examples of serial and parallel processing live in class with face perception and a visual search. We're going to see the limits of your attention when we take a look at two change detection examples. And then we're going to wrap it up with a discussion about where does this attention actually come from. And we're going to see that there's two major types of attention. One is stimulus-driven, and the other one is goal-driven. All right, so what is attention? What is attention all about? Well, attention has to do with the ability to process specific aspects of the information that you're exposed to. So, for example, here we have an image of the School of Athens by Raphael. And in this image, there are tons of information. There's just an overabundance of information. We have many, many individuals here. And you cannot possibly hope to process them all at once. But if I start asking you specific questions, if I start giving you specific goals, such as can you locate Leonardo da Vinci? Can you locate him in this School of Athens? Well, then what you would do is you would start scanning through the faces of all of these individuals until you came across that individual right there, and you would see that Raphael put his teacher, put his mentor and master in this photo, in this painting, but you need to use your attention to find that particular instance. If you are a fan of retro 1980s hair bands, you might be familiar with the work of Guns N' Roses, and their cover for the album Use Your Illusion 2 was taken from the School of Athens. And if I asked you to find that particular child that is taking notes, once again, you can't process the entire scene all at once. You would have to divert your attention to certain parts of the scene until you came upon that image right there, and you see that that is where that cover came from. So attention is something that we use daily in our lives. Attention is something that people will spend a lot of time devoting their cognitive powers to. So if you're a fan of science fiction, comic book type movies, you have no doubt seen endless articles and videos about Easter eggs in your favorite movies. And one in Spider-Man Far From Home that was pointed out was the fact that in Peter Parker's passport, which is shown for all of, I believe, 4 seconds in the movie, his birth date, his birth year is not given. So somebody had to pay attention and find and basically zoom their attention in and realize that usually you have a date right there, but they didn't want to date this movie. They wanted to keep it in somewhat of a flexible timeline. So they took his year off of his passport. So really nice little detail, but once again, most of you who have seen this movie probably didn't notice it, but somebody who was paying attention to that particular feature was able to process that information. So that's kind of like a general idea of where we're going with attention today. So let's start to define some of the particulars. So what exactly is attention? So attention, as we've seen in these examples, is the ability to focus on specific stimuli or locations. So we have way more information, way more stimuli coming in. We have way more information coming into the system than we can hope to process. And your attention is the ability to focus on parts of that information, pieces of that information, either specific types of information or specific locations for information. And attention is also the process by which that information is selected for processing. So it's not just the ability to attend to specific pieces of information, but it's also the ability to choose to attend to that particular piece of information. So how do you even decide to pay attention to the birth year of Peter Parker on his passport? How do you even decide to take a look at Leonardo da Vinci? And then in other cases, how is your attention just grabbed, right? So when people say, oh, do this and it'll really grab people's attention, how is attention grabbed? That's also part of what we need to understand in terms of attention. And typically though, attention kicks in and this process becomes active when there's just too much information to process. Typically when there's just too much going on in our world, we need to then select information that we're going to process, and that's when we have to go into attention. All right, so this brings us to the idea of two types of processing that we're going to see is important for when attention is activated, and they are parallel and serial processing. So parallel processing is when you can process multiple units of information at any particular time. So parallel processing refers to the fact that you have multiple streams of information streaming to you in parallel, and they can all be processed at the same time. That is contrasted with serial processing. And serial processing is where you can only process one unit of information at a time. So let's take a look at what this would look like in our mind. So we'll take a representation, once again, of our mind. So let's say that this is a look inside your mind, and that is a parallel processor. And this parallel processor can take information in on this side, and then it does something to the information in the processor here, and then puts out information onto the other side. And the information units coming in from the external world, we're going to show those as these balls over here. So these circles, these are each individual units of information that are about to hit that parallel processor. So what happens with a parallel processor? Well, this information is streaming in, it's getting close, it finally interacts with the processor takes the information in, and because it's a parallel processor, it can process all of these streams at once. So all of these parallel streams can be processed at once. So this first layer of units all gets processed at the same time, and their contrast gets increased and they get output. This second layer of units, all processed at the same time, third layer, fourth layer, and you can see that very quickly the processing of all 16 of those units has been completed. So that's a parallel processor. Let's change our focus to a serial processor. So in your mind, you might have a serial processor, and once again, it has a better joke than that reaction. Once again, you have your input into the serial processor, you have your outputs out of the serial processor, and you have the same information units, right? So the same amount of information is coming to this serial processor, and it's getting there, and it's getting there, and it's getting there. But a serial processor can only process one stream of information at a time. It's got to take information in serial. It's got to take it in one at a time. So in this case, it can't do all 4 streams, so it has to choose a stream. And it chooses, let's say, the blue stream, and it processes that information, and it processes all 4 units, and then it's ready to take in the red stream, and it can start processing those units, and the blue stream continues on to another location, and then it's ready to process the green stream, and it takes in those units, and then finally, once the green stream is done processing, it is ready to take in the purple stream and to process those units as well. So those are the 2 types of processors that we have in our mind, or 2 of the types of processors that we have in our mind that are important in attention. Any questions so far on parallel and serial? All right, so as we've seen, parallel processing requires very few steps to process all of the information that's coming in. So parallel processing is very fast, and we saw that to process these 16 units of information, it only took 1, 2, 3, 4 steps, and it was done. So parallel processing is typical of very fast processing, very fast response times, very fast behavior. If you're doing something very, very quickly, chances are you're doing it in a parallel processing manner. On the other hand, serial processing, as we saw, took many steps. So these 16 units were processed in 1, 2, 3, 4 steps with a parallel processor. Those same 16 units took 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19 steps with the serial processor. So way more steps with the serial processor than the parallel processor, way more time to process all that information, way more time before you can make a response or do a behavior. So if you find yourself thinking a lot about something or taking a lot of time to make a particular reaction, chances are you're dealing with a serial processor, a task that requires serial processing. All right, so we have those 2 processors. Notice that in our definition of attention being a selection of which information to process, you do not need attention when you're dealing with a a parallel processor. I got to attend to which one is which again. You do not need attention when you're dealing with a parallel processor because no choice of what information to process needs to be made. For a serial processor, you need attention because you need to make the choice of out of these 4 streams of information, I'm going to attend and process the blue stream, and then I'm going to choose to attend and process the red stream, and you have to make that choice in terms of your stimulus. Okay, so let's take a look at a couple of examples of parallel and serial processing. We're going to start off with face perception. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you 2 faces coming up. And what I would like you to do is put your hand up as soon as you know which face is the weird face. So from where you are, if the face on this side is the weird face, put your right hand up. If the face on this side is the weird face, put your left hand up. It's going to be very apparent which one is weird, but that's the task. So everybody ready? All right. Okay. All right. So we got everybody up. Everybody's hands up. It's the right face. That's correct. So that took probably around 10 seconds. Okay, it took a while for everybody to realize which face was weird. Let's try that one more time. Okay, once again, if the face on the right, your right, is the weird face, put your right hand up. If the face on your left is the weird face, put your left hand up. Let's see how long it takes this time. All right, almost no time whatsoever. Everybody was up in about a second. So that indicates that one of these tasks was parallel process and another task was serial process. So the explanation for this inverted face effect, so clear, I mean, it's not even close. Clearly, you know, that's something went wrong with that particular face, but it's not as apparent when you see it here. And the reason for that is because in this situation, you are being put into a very unusual circumstance. You're being put into a situation that you have not developed a parallel processor for, and that is to look at inverted faces. So in our day-to-day lives, we very rarely come across this situation. And in fact, if you just take a look around the room right now, 100% of the faces are correctly oriented upright faces. It is very rare to come across a face that is upside down like this. And what that means is that as we developed our minds, we did not develop a parallel processor for this situation because it just wasn't important. It hadn't come up a lot in our daily lives. What that means is that when you are comparing these faces here, you have to do it piece by piece. You got to go information piece by information piece. You got to take a look at these eyes, and you got to say, is there something wrong with these eyes? And notice, because they use real eyes just inverted, there's nothing wrong with that particular eye. That's actually a great, looking eye. What is wrong is that it's upside down. But you have to put that together. You have to analyze that piece. You got to analyze that piece. You got to analyze that piece. You got to analyze the pieces together and see what the relations are between them. And while you're doing each of these individual pieces of stimulus information processing, the time is adding up. And it's adding up. And 5 seconds goes by, and 6 seconds go by, and finally 10 seconds go by, and everybody's hand was up by that point. Compare that to the upright face. We encounter this all the time, right? Like I said, 100% of the faces in this room, upright faces. So we have dedicated parallel processors that can process a face and take in all the information all at once. We don't have to take in the eyes and the nose and the mouth and the forehead piece by piece by piece. We can process the whole thing all at once. And when you can process the whole thing all at once, then it's immediately apparent that this is incorrect and that this is the correct version of the face. So again, this is an example of parallel processing, and everybody got it almost immediately. Inverted faces, serial processing took way longer to do. All right, any questions on the face example? All right, so for this next example here, we're going to do a little bit of a visual search example. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to graph this one out. And we're going to do the hands up thing once again. So in this case, we're going to have time up here on the y-axis, and we're going to have distractors down here on the x-axis. So this is going to be a visual search challenge. And what I want you to do is I want you to find the B. So your target is the letter B. And it is going to be hidden among distractor P's, right? So you're going to see a B somewhere on the screen. There's going to be P's elsewhere on the screen. And what I want you to do is, once again, as soon as you see the B, put your hand up, and we'll see how long it takes to get the entire class's hands up. Everybody ready? All right, that didn't take very long at all. So we got 2 distractors here. And it took all of, let's say, just 1 second. We'll estimate this. All right, so it took 1 second when we had 2 distractors. We're going to graph this as B's. Okay, so we're going to make it a little bit more difficult. Everybody ready? You're looking for the B? All right, we finally got everybody. The B is right there. So this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. This is 50 distractors. And when we got up to 50 distractors, it now took about 4 to 5 seconds. So we go up to right about there for 50 distractors. There's your B. All right, we're going to do it one more time. Everybody ready? And All right, finally got everybody. Okay, so the B is right there. So now we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. We got 100 distractors. And this time it took even longer. That one took about 6 seconds, I would say. And we have this relationship right there. So you can see that when you're looking for the B's, the more distractors there are, the longer it takes you to find the target that you're looking for. So that's one type of processing. Let's take a look at another type of processing. So we're going to go through this again, but this time we're going to change up the letters. And what I want you to do is I want you to find the O. So we're looking for an O, and it's going to be among distractor X's. So once again, hands up as soon as you see it, and we'll begin right now. All right, so that was very quick. Much like with the 2 distractors for the B's, we got the X. Sorry, you're looking for the O's. We got the O rather quickly. All right, we'll go on to step 2. Everybody ready? All right, once again, super, super fast. We went up to 50 distractors, but notice you saw the O just about as fast as you did when there was only 1 distractor. Let's try it one last time. Saw people already putting their hands up before the slide came up. It's about that fast. You're about that fast. You got the O right there, but everybody's hand went up almost immediately. So that is a very, very different pattern. Now, one of these is serial. One of these is parallel processing. Question is, which one is which? Yep.
The B's the processor.
The B is what type of processor?
Wait, that'd be the serial.
Serial, yes, exactly. So the B here is serial processing. And this is the pattern that you see with a serial processor. And the reason for that is because if you're serially processing this information, you have to go piece by piece by piece, right? You got to go part by part by part before you can actually find the B that you're looking for. So you got to go, I should have put it up here, but you got to go P. You got to analyze every single one until you finally hit that B, and it takes longer the more distractors that you have. For this one over here, it's parallel processing. And what that means is that when you have 2 items, you can process both of those items at the same time, and you know that's your O. When you have 50 items, you can process all 50 at once. You can take in that 50 streams of information, process the whole thing at once, there's your O right there. You got 100, you can take in all 100, process it all at once, there's your O right there. It doesn't increase when you increase more stimulus because you can process the entire stream and you can do it all at once. All right, any questions on parallel versus serial processing? All right. Okay, so when you're dealing with attention, and the reason that we have cognitive psychology as a science is oftentimes we tend to introspect to see whether or not we can do a particular behavior, or we introspect to see whether or not we can achieve a certain goal. And what we find in cognitive psychology is that we have really no idea how good, or usually how bad we are at doing certain tasks. And the reason for that is because we just don't notice things that are not important. We just don't notice oftentimes things that do not really make a difference, or just, it's an indication of our need for attention. So we're going to go take a look at change blindness here and change detection. And this is really a good example, and this was a very surprising example of, number one, how little of our environment do we actually process. And number two, because of that, just a massive importance of our ability to attend to different stimuli. So being able to attend is massively important because otherwise, our ability to process our world is just not really as high as we think it is. So we go through the world thinking that we're pretty much aware of everything that's going on, but when you take a look at studies like the ones in change detection, we see that we're really not that aware at all. So this is going to demonstrate how we can detect changes in our environment, the need for attention to detect these changes, and the need to specifically pay attention to information and process that information in order to indicate the change. So once again, we might think we're aware of stuff in our environment, but unless we specifically pay attention to that stuff and process that stuff, we have this illusion of awareness, but we're not actually aware. And it kind of shows the importance of choosing a specific area or amount of information, paying attention to that information, specifically processing it, and that is when we become aware. So we'll go through an example right now called the M something something W something something B. And for that, we are going to go to the computer here. So what we're going to do here is follow the instructions on the screen, and we'll see how we do as a class on this particular test of awareness.
This is an awareness test. How many passes does the team in white make?
All right. How many passes did the team in white make? 13? Anybody disagree with 13? Okay, so we have a consensus here. There was 13 passes done by the white team. Okay. Hands up. Don't say it, but hands up if you notice something a little weird, something out of the ordinary. Okay, so we have a small subset of the class, definitely less than 50%. Notice something a little weird in this video.
The answer is 13.
Okay, so first off, you are asked to attend to the players in white making passes, and we got that correct. You were able to process that information, and you saw that there were 13 passes made.
But did you see the moonwalking bear?
All right, so everybody with your hand up, I'm assuming that that was the weird thing that you were referring to, and you noticed this moonwalking bear. Somehow you were able to process this moonwalking bear and say to yourself, you know, that's kind of weird, I wouldn't have expected that. Anybody that didn't have their hand up somehow missed this moonwalking bear. And what change detection really showed us is the importance of attention in detecting things in our environment. Because this isn't a bear that was somewhere off in the distance. This isn't a bear, you know, that was like a little small part of the scene. This is a bear that you couldn't possibly miss if you were looking for that bear. So now that you know that there's a moonwalking bear, you'll see that it's very easy to detect. All right, kind of hard to miss a guy in a full-on bear suit going in there. And I mean, I guess you can call that moonwalking, you know, but it falls within the category. All right. Okay, so that's a very nice example. That was one of the first kind of demos of change blindness that came around. And it really is amazing that for those of you that missed the moonwalking bear, that you missed it. Right, that you weren't able to process that rather massive piece of information. So a lot of work has been done on what sort of characteristics and things are required to see the moonwalking bear. Why do you miss the moonwalking bear? So any ideas about why we missed that moonwalking bear? Yep.
I mean, the bear looks darker, so we're only paying attention to lighter clothes. And then if you're paying too close of attention to passes, you might miss it.
Okay, so there's actually two answers there that both contribute to this. Number one is that you're paying attention to the passes. So there is a lot of information that is coming at you in this video. Information like what everybody is wearing, information for how many people there are. Does anybody know how many people there were? You got to think about it for a while. You have to go back and say, okay, oh, there it is, there's the 8. So you have to pay attention to how many people there are in order to process that information. So we kind of think that this information is just processed already because we seem to be aware of it. We're aware of the people, but unless you focus on a particular aspect of the scene, you'll often miss large portions of the scene, such as a large moonwalking bear. The other reason for this is that you were, at the same time that you were paying attention to something and directing your attention towards a particular stimulus, you're also directing your attention away from another particular stimulus. So what were you not paying attention to? The team in black. You were not paying attention to any of the team in black. So the fact that you were not paying attention to the team in black meant that anything that looked like that particular team or very similar to that particular team would not have grabbed your attention. So in this case, we have two sources of attention, one being exaggerated or utilized, the other one working against you. We have attention that is goal-driven, where you were told, pay attention to the white players, pay attention to how many passes the players in white make. And then you have attention that was going to grab your attention, such as a moonwalking bear, which is a weird thing to see, but that was minimized. That ability for that moonwalking bear to grab your attention was minimized because you were asked to pay attention to a different set of stimuli. All right, so that kind of touches on this next one. Would you have noticed the moonwalking bear if you focused? Would you be more likely to notice the moonwalking bear if you focused on the team, let's just say the team in black? And studies have shown that, yeah, you are more likely to find or see that moonwalking bear if you're focusing on the team in black making passes, because once again, the bear more falls into that category that you are directing your attention towards, that you have that goal-driven attention for. So what does it say about the way that our attention works? Let me ask you, I'll ask this in a different way. Was anybody surprised that they missed the moonwalking bear? Would anybody have, I guess that's another way of saying you would have expected to have noticed something as extreme as this moonwalking bear outside of this demonstration. And this is what change detection really sort of revolutionized in cognitive psychology. It really shone a spotlight on just how little of our environment we actually attend to, how little of what is out there we actually process. And we have this, and the reason you were surprised is because we have this illusion that we process the information. We have this illusion that we're aware of our environment, and but we're really not. We're really not aware of it unless we specifically ask or direct our attention to process different parts of that environment. All right, so we process information that indicates change. That's how we can actually notice a change. And for some of you, in case you've already seen that one, and I know that some of you have probably seen the moonwalking bear before, or if you hadn't seen it and you want one more chance to tackle one of these change detection scenarios, what we're going to do is we're going to see another video, and for those of you that have had my P211 class, you'll have seen this one. But in this next video, what I want you to focus on is, does the inspector's coat change? So this is the video in question, and here's the inspector. And what I would like you to do is answer the question, does the inspector's coat change during this scenario?
Clearly, somebody in this room murdered Lord Smythe, who, at precisely 3:34 this afternoon, was brutally bludgeoned to death with a blunt instrument. I want each of you to tell me your whereabouts at precisely the time that this dastardly deed took place.
I was polishing the brass in the master bedroom.
I was buttering his lordship's gold below stairs, sir.
I was planting my petunias in the potting shed.
Constable, arrest Lady Smythe.
But how did you know?
Madam, as any horticulturist will tell you, one does not plant petunias until May is out. Take her away. It's just a matter of observation. The real question is, how observant were you?
I jumped the gun there. All right. Seriously.
Clearly, somebody in this room.
Space bar is not working. Okay. Hands up if you noticed the inspector's coat changing. All right. Everybody noticed the inspector's coat changing. Just like almost everybody got 13 passes for the basketball. So you direct your attention to a particular aspect of this scene, and you can very easily process it. And what color was the coat at the beginning? What color was it at the end? And exactly. So we all got that right. We processed that information correctly. Good for us. 21 changes in this video. Did anybody notice any of the other changes? We got a few. Would you notice? All right. So there was a bear and it changed into a suit of armor. Yep. Portrait in the background changed. Yep. The flowers in the vase changed. In the back, yep. Clock on the floor changed. Throw up to 4. Yep.
The dead guy and the butler.
The dead guy changed and the butler
He's
changed.
holding something else.
The butler was holding something and then was holding something else. Does anybody know what changed in the butler holding? Yep.
I think he was holding like a wine bottle at first, and then he was holding like some weird like mixed stuff of some kind.
Okay, so maybe a wine bottle too, but butler changed what he was holding. Any other? Yep.
The maid, she was holding a broom and then she was holding a frying pan.
All right, maid went from a broom to a frying pan. Yep.
There's the lamp.
The what?
The lamp.
The lamp. What changed about the lamp? Something changed about the lamp. Okay, so we're up to 8. Anyone else? Okay, so we're up to noticing 8 things that changed. We have over 20 people in this room. 21 changes, and yet there was 8 that were noticed. And I'll tell you right now, a few of these were, I think it changed, right? So I think it was something about it changed. And when I prodded about, do you have the information for what actually changed? The answer was no. Like, I do not know what it changed from what to what. And other ones were incorrect. So you got the fact that it changed, but the change was incorrect. And interestingly, when I do this demonstration, the one that is always noticed is the bear changing into a suit of armor. And we're going to discuss why that is in just a little bit. But before we do that, let's see what the 21 changes are. And the reason that I was asking whether or not you could say what it changed from and what it changed to is because basically you could have pointed to almost anything in this video. They all change.
Clearly, somebody in this room murdered Lord Smythe, who, at precisely 3:34 this afternoon, was brutally bludgeoned to death with a blunt instrument. I want each of you to tell me your whereabouts at precisely the time that this dastardly deed took place.
I was polishing the brass in the master bedroom.
I was buttering his lordship's gold below stairs, sir.
I was planting my petunias in the potting shed.
Constable, arrest Lady Smythe.
All right, massive changes. Just about everything changed. 21 different changes. We got 8 of them, kind of. But again, just shows you how little of the information that is coming in from your environment you actually end up processing. So as I mentioned previously, or just now, this suit of armor here is one of the ones that is typically noticed. It's one of the ones that people typically, if I ask, has anything changed? The suit of armor is noticed. What was it about the suit of armor that made you notice it? Sorry?
When the camera zoomed back in, it's still in motion.
Yes. So when the camera goes back to the suit of armor, it just got moved and it's still kind of doing this a little bit. And as we're going to see in upcoming classes when we take a look at perception, we are hardwired parallel processing to detect motion. Motion is a very important stimulus in the environment. Motion means that you are probably going to have to react to something pretty soon. And that is why if you ever try to grab somebody's attention, if you ever tell somebody, I'm going to grab a table at the restaurant, you're coming 30 minutes late, just come in and find me. Once you see them, once they walk through that door, what do? You wave at them, right? Exactly. You start putting in motion. Because motion, much like that suit of armor in motion grabs your attention. So immediately, when you're waving your hand and they're looking around the room, even if it's out of the corner of their eye, they're going to see that motion and it will grab their attention, and they'll be like, "Oh, there's my dinner party. There's my dinner guests." So that's what we're going to end today's meeting on. And what we're going to ask now is, we've seen how important attention is, we've seen parallel and serial processing, but the last thing that we're going to touch on today is, where does this attention come from? Because if you recall at the beginning, attention was the process by which we focus on different aspects of the environment, different stimuli, in order to process those stimuli. But then it's also the process by which we select that stimulus for processing. So it's not just processing a specific stimulus, it's also involved in selecting a specific stimulus. Basically, where does that selection come from? How does that selection occur? And two major sources of this, where that selection is made, are called exogenous and endogenous. So we've seen examples in the moonwalking bear of exogenous and endogenous attention. We've seen examples in the inspector of endogenous and exogenous attention. We're going to see one more time an example of exogenous and endogenous attention, and this is from one of my favorite movies of all time. It was a movie that was made in the 1900s. So don't be surprised if you haven't seen it. If you've seen it, it's The Matrix. So if you haven't seen it, I would highly suggest take a look at it, watch the first one, skip the next two. I hope the reboot is good. But this is an almost perfect example, textbook example of exogenous versus endogenous attention.
The Matrix is a system, Neo. That system is our enemy. When you're in...
Oh, and incidentally, this is the movie why everybody was freaking out when Lawrence Fishburne was cast in the John Wick series, because, and all those fan theories about John Wick is happening in the Matrix. This is the reason why.
You look around, what do you see? Businessmen, teachers, lawyers, carpenters. The very minds of the people we are trying to save. But until we do, these people are still a part of that system, and that makes them our enemy. You have to understand, most of these people are not ready to be unplugged. And many of them are so inert, so hopelessly dependent on the system, that they will fight to protect it. Were you listening to me, Neo? Or were you looking at the board in the red dress? I was, yeah.
All right. everything wrong with the Matrix in 12 minutes. That should be a 2-second video that just says nothing. All right. I love the Matrix. Anyways, so that's a great example of where attention comes from. That's a great example of the sources of attention. So there's two major sources that drive the selection, why you make a particular selection. And the first one we're going to talk about was exemplified by the woman in the red dress. And this is stimulus-driven attention. Sometimes you choose a stream of information to process. You choose a stimulus to process just because of the nature of that stimulus, just because of the features of that stimulus itself. So that is called stimulus-driven attention. The attention comes from the stimulus. The attention comes from the fact that there's something about this woman in the red dress that grabs your attention. So that is known as exogenous control. And exogenous comes from the roots exo, meaning outside, and genus, meaning generated. So this is attention that is generated from the outside. It doesn't come from internal sources, it comes from external sources. It comes from things in the environment, it comes from features of the stimulus. It's exo, outside of you, genesis, or genus, generated, and it is when the stimulus itself grabs your attention, attention driven by the stimulus. So in this example from the Matrix, the woman in the red dress is the exogenous stimulus because Neo paid attention to her without any sort of command, paid attention to her without any instruction, just was looking around at the world, and the woman in the red dress grabbed his attention. In the example with the inspector, what would one clear example of exogenous attention be? Something that grabbed your attention, but it was because of the stimulus itself and not because of a goal that you were trying to accomplish.
That'd be the suit of armor.
It would have been the suit of armor. So the suit of armor is an example of exogenous control. So there was something about the suit of armor itself. The fact that it was in motion is a stimulus-driven form of attention. So I didn't ask you to pay attention to the suit of armor. I didn't indicate that the suit of armor was at all important. But the fact that that is the stimulus that is most often noticed is evidence that it's stimulus-driven. It's exogenous control. It comes from the outside. In the moonwalking bear example, the moonwalking bear is an example of exogenous control. So again, there's something weird about the moonwalking bear, something that grabbed your attention. And if you notice the moonwalking bear, you noticed it because of this exogenous control, because of this control that came from outside, a selection of the attention that came from the outside, specifically because of the characteristics of the stimulus. All right, so that is stimulus-driven control. The opposite of that, the other major source of attention, is goal-directed attention. And goal-directed attention is called endogenous control. So this time we got endo, which means inside, instead of exo, which means outside. So this is attention that comes from within. It's goal-directed attention coming from our own goals. And it is genus, once again, which is generated. And this is attention where we specifically move our attention on purpose, willfully, goal-directed. And your attention is driven by whatever your goal is at that point. So when, I'll just pop back the video real quick. All right, so once again,
hopelessly dependent on the system that they would fight to protect.
All right, something about the woman in the red dress grabbed Neo's attention. That is exogenous control. He wasn't instructed to pay attention to her. It wasn't a goal of his to pay attention to her. Something about her grabbed his attention. He was processing that stimuli. That's exogenous control.
Were you listening to me, Neo? Or were you looking at the woman in the red dress? I was
All right, that command from Morpheus, look again, that's endogenous control, because now Neo has a goal. Now Morpheus has said, pay attention to the woman in the red dress, pay attention to that particular stimulus, and now Neo is directing his attention towards that stimulus from within, from the inside. There's nothing grabbing his attention at this point, because she is not even in view anymore, but his attention is still being directed towards her, but now it's coming from the inside. Now it's goal-directed attention. So in this situation, Morpheus's command to look again, that's goal-directed attention. Neo tries to process the woman in the red dress one more time, and that is from an internal goal, coming from the inside. In the moonwalking bear example, what was exogenous control of your attention in that situation? I heard count the number of passes. Exactly. So count the number of passes was the exogenous control of your, endogenous control, the goal-directed attention, the endogenous control of your attention. So when you were instructed, pay attention to how many passes the team in white makes, you directed your attention to the team in white. That was goal-directed. You had a goal. You wanted to count the number of passes. You wanted to get the right number. You directed your attention there, not because it grabbed your attention, but because you directed your attention purposefully there. In the Whodunnit mystery video, what was the exogenous control in that one? Sorry, what was the endogenous control? What was the goal-directed attention in the Whodunnit video? The change in the code, exactly. So I very specifically and deliberately told everybody in here, pay attention to the code and see if the code changes. There's nothing about that code that would have grabbed your attention otherwise. It wasn't sparkly, it wasn't a weird color, but because I said pay attention to that code, you generated attention, you processed that code, it came from the inside, it came from an endo source that was endogenous control, and you were paying attention to the code, and you were able to process that information. So those are the two major sources of how we choose what to process. On the one side, we got exogenous control that comes from the outside, that comes from the stimulus. And then on the other side, we have endogenous control, that's goal-directed attention. That's when we willfully and purposefully say, I choose this to attend to because I need to accomplish this particular goal. All right, so that is what I wanted to cover for attention today. Any final questions on what we've seen at this point? We're all good? All right. So that is it for this week. So make sure that you're staying on top of your mastery training. Remember, it is enforced distributed training. So you will be locked out after you complete a session. So just make sure that you're revisiting that daily. Stay on top of all your other due dates. And I'm glad to see a lot of people have started on the social media development program. And hopefully we'll continue to see that involvement. But other than that, we are done for today.